Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and we have another jam-packed show in store for all of you today. Going to be a lot of fun. Hope everyone had a nice, safe, and enjoyable weekend. I'm sure this was a good weekend for everyone to rest and recharge their batteries, kind of get ready for the work week ahead. I've always loved a nice 3-day weekend, and it's good to kick your feet up a little bit. You know, nothing wrong with some rest and relaxation. And like I said, a big show in store for all of you today. I'll jump into what we have in store for today. So first, I'll get into my usual recaps of games, these coming on Friday, September 4th. A lot of really good games. Things are starting to really get interesting in the league as we start to near the playoffs and start to get closer to the postseason time. Later on, I'll then get into a discussion and discuss some of the biggest 3 to 4 game series coming up down the road for certain teams. And for some of these teams, these series will potentially make or break their season this year. So going to be some very pivotal games coming up down the road. Following that segment, I'll get into my Futures All-Star team, selecting the best 25 and under players to field an All-Star team. I know I did a normal All-Star team a few episodes ago, but I want to now highlight those players who are young stars in the making and who really could be the face of baseball in the next couple years. And be sure to stick around for the final segment today, as I will discuss the possibility of different off-sites being used for the playoffs and the World Series this year as well, where those sites might be and any other tidbits on that topic and where the postseason might be held, any issues that I might see, coming up in this kind of hub city-esque playoff format that they could potentially be using. So it's going to be very interesting. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but I want to now jump into some recaps from Friday, September 4th, and I'll kick it off first. Brewers, Indians, scoreless through first 3 innings. So no runs were scored until the top of the 4th. Milwaukee breaking that 0-0 tie. So going into the 5th inning, it was a 1-0 game, Milwaukee, and then Cleveland scored in the bottom of the 5th, and then Milwaukee tacked on 4 runs in the 7th and 2 in the 8th to ultimately win 7-1. They're now 18-19 on the year, while the Indians are 23-15. Keston Hiura had a huge day from the plate for the Brewers. Corbin Burns was lights out on the mound. He was unbelievable. He's been one of the best, if not the best pitchers on this Milwaukee team. He's really kind of risen up through the rotation as one of their rotation guys, or one of their aces, if not their ace, their main ace. I mean, he's 2-0. He's got a 2.35 ERA. I mean, he had 7 strikeouts against the Indians on Friday. He had a 10 strikeout game a couple games ago, so he could start making a case for a potential ace, because this team doesn't really have an ace, and that's kind of the big issue with them. It's not like the Indians where they have Shane Bieber or Zach Plesac. The Brewers don't have anybody that is that dominant or that lights out from the mound or on the mound. So, hopefully they can maybe have Burns turn into that ace as time goes on, or maybe they'll go out and try and get some, better pieces down the road, or maybe there's somebody in their farm system that's going to rise up and become that ace, but we'll have to see. But a great win by Milwaukee. Next game, a doubleheader. First of the 2, the Tigers and the Twins taking on each other. Twins winning 2-0 in the first of 2 games. Minnesota scoring the only 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the 1st. Jorge Polanco hit a solo homer, big solo shot for him. He's been hitting the ball very well this year. 289, 4 home runs, 22 RBIs. He's been having a very, very good year. Twins moved to 23-16, while the Tigers are now 17-18. So the Twins have now kind of, jockeyed a little bit for position with the Indians. They also won the next one of the doubleheader, the Twins and the Tigers, beating the Tigers this time 3-2, and this one went into 8 innings, actually. So Minnesota scoring the first run of the game in the top of the 3rd, and the Detroit tacking on 2 in the bottom of the 3rd. And then Minnesota would put up 1 in the top of the 7th, tied it up, forced it into 8 innings, and then they ultimately put on that game, go-ahead, game-deciding 1 run in the top of the 8th to win 3-2. Really, really nice job by the Twins to come back. I mean, you're going scoreless through the 4th, 5th, and 6th innings, and then able to tack on that 1 run that you need. I mean, that is really, really big. That's a really, really big thing to have, especially, the Twins are right now in third place. And with the Indians and how well the White Sox have been playing, the Twins now making a case for, being in first place now. They're kind of, on the outside looking in, which has been kind of an unusual thing for them this year. So for them to possibly, find their way back into the first place, that would be really, really big for them. And if not, I mean, I don't want to say that they're completely out of it, because they're not, because they can't be, because, I mean, they're the Twins, right? They've been, one of the most dominating teams this season. So hopefully we can see them, make some sort of miraculous comeback, and we can see them back into that first place spot. But again, as we'll hear later on in later on in this show, they're going to have a couple really big series coming down the road, and same with the Indians and same with the White Sox, that could potentially, again, make or break their season and really dictate the outcome for their playoff hopes, honestly. So the next game, another doubleheader. A lot of doubleheaders were going on Friday. This one was between the Reds and the Pirates. So the first of two games, Pirates losing 4-2. Reds now moved to 17-21, while the Pirates, again, they're at that dismal 11-25 record. Cincinnati scored the first run of the game in the top of the second, while both teams put up 2 runs in the third inning. And then in the top of the fifth, Cincinnati was able to put up another run and ultimately win 4-2. Really nice job by the Reds. I mean, Colin Moran had a nice day for the Pirates. He had an RBI single. Nick Castellanos, another solo homer. He's out of between him and Mike Moustakas, the two big power hitters that they were hoping to bring on and have an electric year. It's been Castellanos, and he's honestly cooled off since the beginning of the year. I think people continue to think that he's having this lights out year. He's cooled off significantly, but he's still having a very good season nonetheless. So we have to give credit where credit is due. Hitting that big solo homer, I mean, that was huge for not only his confidence, but for his team. I mean, if they want to find themselves in a playoff position, they are 4 games under 500. Well, as I'll get into the next game, because they lost 4-3 to the Pirates, so now they're 5 games under 500. But still, they're not that many games under 500. And we've seen many instances this year where a team is, 3 or 4, 5, 6 games under 500, they go on a 5, 6, 7 game winning streak, and then all of a sudden they're a game above 500. So it doesn't take a whole lot, I think, for some of these teams to really get going. It's just a matter of them having a good week or not. And like I mentioned, the next game, Pirates came back and won in 7 innings, 4-3 over the Reds. Cincinnati scoring the first 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the first, and then Pittsburgh scoring 3 in the top of the fourth and 1 in the top of the fifth. Cincinnati was only able to score 1 in the bottom of the fourth, and it was not enough, as the Pirates were able to win 4-3. Another, I mean, hey, moving to 12-25, nothing to really be proud of, but again, at least they're able to, get a W when they can. Next game, another doubleheader. Yes, there was a lot of doubleheaders on Friday. It was a big doubleheader day. This one between the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. First one, Blue Jays winning 8-7 over the Red Sox, and like the Pirates, this Red Sox team is bad. And I know that is very, unusual, not very conventional for the Red Sox to be this bad. I think that it's also because they lost a lot. I think it's because it's a 60-game season. I think there's a lot of things that are, culminating that are making it seem like they are worse than they really are. I really don't think that, their record reflects the team that they are, in my opinion. I think if they had a healthy team, they had a healthy pitching rotation, I think they would be a totally different team. Do I think that they would be the normal Boston Red Sox? No. But having David Price gone, Chris Sale is continuing to rehab. Evaldi is in and out of the rotation. Eduardo Rodriguez, he's been in and out of the rotation. So, 4 of your main guys in that rotation, and Ricky Porcello's not there anymore either. So, I mean, you're missing basically your entire rotation, right? I mean, I know Rodriguez has, kind of been back and forth in the lineup, and same with Evaldi. So, maybe later on in the season they can come back and be healthy and they can finish the season out strong, but there's really no hope for them making the playoffs. Toronto scored 3 runs in the top of the second, while Boston responded with 2 in the top and bottom of the second, and then Toronto tacked on another run in the top of the third, and then it would be 1 run by Toronto in the top of the fifth, and 3 runs were scored by both teams in the 6th inning. So really nice job by the Blue Jays to hold the Red Sox to those 7 runs, because, I mean, Boston tried to make a comeback. They really tried to make a legitimate comeback in that 6th inning, but they weren't able to do it. Danny Jansen, he had a 2-run home run for the Blue Jays, really big day for him. And then Yair Munoz, he also had a 2-run home run for the Red Sox. So we're starting to see some guys that are budding through this lineup and through this, roster on the Red Sox. Who knows? We might start seeing some names that we don't really know about a whole lot, and then all of a sudden, they're a brand new Red Sox team. You have Rafael Devers, you factor him in, Alex Verdugo, you factor him in, Bogarts. I mean, they've got a really nice core group of guys, JD Martinez, so they just need to surround them with some good young prospects, and I think they'll be fine for the next couple years. Next game in the doubleheader, Red Sox responded, winning 3-2 over the Blue Jays, and this was just a bunch of one-run spots in multiple different, half innings. Top of the second, Boston put up 1 run there, and then top of the third, they also put a run there. Toronto put up a run in the bottom of the 4th and the bottom of the 6th, but again, it was not enough. Boston put up that one go-ahead run in the top of the 5th that would propel them to, their 13th win on the season. Blue Jays are now 21-17, so they've started to really pick up the pace of play lately, and if they continue to roll like they've been rolling lately, this could potentially be a Blue Jays team that could make the playoffs. I really do think that, and I can't believe I'm saying that right now because I still have hopes for the Orioles, but I mean, the Blue Jays have been playing very, very good baseball lately. So you have to give credit where credit's due, and I think that if they continue to play like that, they're going to find themselves in the playoffs. So the next, again, doubleheader, Nationals-Braves, a little NL East rivalry. First game, Braves won in whomping fashion, 7-1, and Atlanta scored 1 run in the bottom of the first, 2 in the bottom of the third, 2 in the bottom of the fourth, 2 in the bottom of the 6th, and then Washington was only able to score 1 run in the top of the 4th. Ronald Acuna Jr., a 2-homer game. We're going to hear about him later on in the show. One of the best young players in baseball, one of the best young outfielders in baseball. Really nice job by him on Friday. Dansby Swanson had an RBI single. Ronald Acuna, like I said, he hit 2 homers. Yan Gomes had a sac fly. That was the only run scored for the Nationals in that first of 2 games in the doubleheader. So, again, the only run being on a sac fly, you aren't going to get it done with that minimal of offensive production. Now, in the next game, though, that was a totally different story for both teams, as the Nationals won 10-9. So both teams scored a run in the first inning, and then in the second inning, Washington scored a run in the top of the second, while Atlanta actually took the lead and would take a 3-2 lead going into the third inning with 2 runs scored in the bottom of the second, but then it was a 5-run third inning for Washington that would really be the difference maker. I mean, the Braves did come back with a 4-run bottom 4 inning, but Washington was able to put up 1 run in the top of the 6th, 2 in the top of the 7th, and then they were able to hold Atlanta to only 2 runs, keeping them from coming back and forcing the extra innings. Trey Turner hit a solo home run. Wilmer Defoe also had a sac fly RBI. Michael A. Taylor had an RBI bunt. And when you have a guy that's able to score a run off of a bunt, A, the batter is very fast and he's a very good bunter, and B, whoever's at third is hauling behind down the line trying to make it to home plate, and whomever it was did a really nice job at doing that. So great bounce back win by the Nationals. Braves moved to 23-15, while the Nationals are 13-24. Moving on to the next game, these were again, this was actually a doubleheader, but it was a makeup game. So that one game did go into 9 innings, the other one went into 7 innings. And this one was, a back-and-forth game. I mean, this was a back-and-forth, I should say, this game went into 9 innings, and the next game went into 7 innings. So the Yankees won 6-5 against the Orioles in the first game. Baltimore scored a run in the bottom of the first, while the Yankees scored 1 in the top of the second, 1 and 3 in the top of the third. And, they tried their best. The Orioles did. They came back. They scored a run in the bottom of the 9th, but it was not enough. I mean, the Yankees did, again, a nice job at holding the Orioles and making sure that they don't make that comeback and force those extra innings. Clint Frazier and Miguel Andujar both drove in runs for the Yankees. Brett Gardner had a 2-run signal as well. So, I mean, the fact that he's able to still produce from the plate and he's as old as he is, that's pretty unbelievable. And again, I mean, it goes to show you how good this Yankees team is, the depth that they have. Even the old guy, Brett Gardner's getting it done. Rio Ruiz had a 2-run homer for the Orioles, so he continues to hit very, very well for Baltimore this year. And in the next game, this one was a final in 7, the Orioles would bounce back and win 6-3. Baltimore scored 2 runs in the bottom of the second, while the Yankees put up 1 run in the top of the third, 2 in the top of the fourth, and then the Orioles would score 4 in the bottom of the fifth. That would really be, the deciding factor. Rio Ruiz had another RBI single. well. Ryan Mountcastle's had a game-tying RBI that was very pivotal for the Orioles. So a lot of really clutch hitting for the Orioles also. And again, the fact that this team is young and they've got a nice core group of players, maybe not this year, but down the road, we're going to start hearing more and more about Baltimore, and we're going to start seeing the Birds in a better playoff position probably in future years. Next game, first doubleheader that I have not talked about since back when I talked about the Indians and Brewers game earlier. This one, a little battle of the Sunshine State. Marlins against the Rays. Rays winning 5-4. Tampa scored the first run of the game in the bottom of the second, but then Miami would put up runs in the third, fourth, and fifth inning. Tampa Bay did put up 4 runs in the bottom of the fourth. That really proved to be, the difference maker for the Rays in this one. Jesus Aguilar did have a solo homer for the Marlins. Corey Dickerson also had a solo homer for the Marlins. So, some good hitting for Miami, but again, they just weren't able to get it done. It wasn't enough. And the Rays, they continue to dominate, 27-12 now, while the Marlins are 16-17, so they slip under 500. We'll see how they're able to bounce back and, make some sort of comeback. And if they really want to find themselves in the playoff position, because as I'm about to get into it, the Phillies have all of a sudden started to make a little bit of a push for the playoffs, and they started to make a case for themselves in that second place spot, and they could make an NL wildcard spot. Speaking of the Phillies, like I mentioned, Phillies and Mets were the next game, and the Phillies won 5-3, moving to 19-15. Jake Arrieta had 7 Ks over 7 frames, so a really nice job from Jake Arrieta, and it's a great sign to have, him pitching well, because he's, since he came from the Cubs, I feel like he has not performed to the level that he was performing when he was in Chicago. Now, he's still been very good, but he has not been the typical Jake Arrieta. He's still had a lot of success, and again, he's proving why he's still that, he's proving, hey, I'm still Jake Arrieta, you cannot count me out. 7 Ks over 7 frames, that's pretty impressive. In this one, Phillies scored the first 2 runs of the game, 1 in the top of the second, 1 in the top of the third, and then the Mets scored 2 in the bottom of the fifth. But then the Phillies would put on 1 in the top of the seventh and 2 in the top of the eighth. The Mets were only able to score 1 more in the bottom of the eighth, and that was it for them. Again, New York is starting to really struggle. They're starting to really, really slip, and we could see a little bit of a downfall even more, because they were trying to make a little bit of a push. They were knocking at the door a little bit, but with the Phillies now 19-15. I think that the Mets are going to have to really play perfect baseball from here on out if they want to find any sort of hope of making the playoffs. Next game. Chicago Royals. Chicago taking down the Royals, the White Sox that is, taking down the Royals 7-4. White Sox winning and moving to 24-15, while the Royals are the exact opposite of their record, 14-25. Chicago scored the first 2 runs of the game, 1 in the top of the first, 1 in the top of the second, while Kansas City scored 1 in the bottom of the second. So again, pretty even ball game through the first 3 innings, but then Chicago would just go on a tear through the 4th and 7th innings. 4th inning they scored 1, 5th inning they scored 1, the 6th inning they scored 2, and then the 7th inning they scored 1. So again, that's spread out offense, and we're starting to see those teams that are able to spread out the runs throughout an entire game. They're the most dangerous. They're the ones that are going to do the most damage. Eloy Jimenez had a 3-hit game. He's been unbelievable. He's been playing lights out, second on the team in home runs with 11. Jose Abreu had a 2-run double, so a really big game out of him. I mean, one of those hits for Eloy was an RBI, so driving in runs, big power hitting, which is always a really, really great sign for the White Sox, especially moving into the playoff time, but great win by Chicago. Moving on, next game, a little NL Central rivalry now. Cubs-Cardinals, Cubs winning 4-1. Chicago scoring the first 2 runs in the bottom of the second, and then adding on to that score total by adding 1 run in the bottom of the third, and then St. Louis would score 1 in the top of the sixth. Chicago would add on an insurance run in the bottom of the sixth, and that would be it for them. Wilson Contreras had a 4 RBI game, really good game for the Chicago Cub. Yu Darvish, I mean, he's been absolutely lights out. Moves to 7-1 on the year, is leading the league in wins, and he's got a 1.44 ERA. So it's the year of Yu Darvish, because he has been lights out for the Chicago Cubs. And quite frankly, this is a team that is not talked about much, I feel. I don't think that they are mentioned a whole lot, and for that to happen, I think that, I mean, and I hate to defend Chicago, but you got to give credit where credit's due. They've been playing unbelievable, and Yu Darvish is having a year to remember. Not to mention, he's bounced back from the really tough years that he had the year before and the year before that. So now we're starting to see Yu get back into his normal form, which I think for the Chicago Cubs is going to pay dividends for them come playoff time, because they're going to need an ace to go to, I think. And I think that's, been a lot of their issues in last 2 years or so. I mean, they have had those those go-to pitchers, but they haven't had somebody like you who is, just dominating. I mean, Yu Darvish is dominating this year. 7-1, a 1.44 ERA. Those are dominating numbers. So if he can continue that on, I think the Cubs are going to make a lot of noise in the postseason. Next game went into extra innings. Angels-Astros. Angels winning 6-5. Angels scored the first 3 runs of the game in the bottom of the third, so they jumped out all over them. And then the Angels would add another run in the bottom of the third, but then the top of the fourth, Houston would finally add some runs themselves, and then it was the top of the ninth that Houston was able to force into extra innings. 3 runs in that top 9 innings. So if you're scoring 9 runs in those, latter half, or scoring 3 runs in the latter half of the game in that ninth inning spot, I mean, that's scary, especially with how the Astros have kind of, I don't want to say slumping. Well, they kind of have been slumping. I think that, earlier on in the season, they were not to their normal form. Now they have started to pick up the pace a little bit. They're 21-16 now. But again, with having that asset on your team, that ability to score late runs later in games, that's really hard to do. Really, really hard to do. And again, the Angels did a nice job at bouncing back and winning those. Shohei Ohtani had the walk-off single. Mike Trout hit his 299th home run, so 1 away from that 300 spot. Congratulations to Mike Trout on, again, continuing to be dominating the best player in baseball by far. Dylan Bundy, who's been a nice surprise for the Angels pitching-wise, he's been a really, really good spot in their rotation. Struck out 8, but again, he wasn't able to get the win, unfortunately. So moving on from that game, Rangers, Mariners. This one was a 6-3 decision as the Mariners took down the Rangers, kind of a battle of the bottom barrel teams in the AL West. No runs were scored in the first inning, but then bottom of the second, Seattle tacked on a run. Then they added 2 more in the fourth inning. Texas scored 1 in the fifth, and then it was Texas who actually scored 2 in the top of the ninth. Tried to make a little bit of a comeback there, but again, those extra runs that were scored, 3 runs in the bottom of the 8th for Seattle, 2 in the 4th, those innings where they're able to add more than 1 run, that was really the difference maker. That was really what was able to push them over the top and able to give them that W. J.P. Crawford for the Mariners had a 3-run homer, big home run out of him. Evan White, he's started to pick up the pace a little bit, and he started to wake up a little bit from the plate. He had a 2-run double, so, a guy who was hitting around the Mendoza line, if not lower, a couple weeks ago, starting to pick up the pace of play a little bit. So we'll see if either team can make any sort of miraculous turnaround, but I don't think either one of them is going to make the playoffs this year. Next game, NL West battle, Dodgers-Rockies. Dodgers winning 10-6. And again, this shows why the Dodgers are this dominant. They moved to 30-10 now. The Rockies, who have really had, kind of a tale of 2 seasons, really. They went from being first to nearly last now. They're 18-20. Colorado and LA both scored 1 run in the first inning, but then Colorado was able to put up 4 in the top of the 8th, but it was a 3-run 7th inning and a 5-run 8th inning for the Dodgers that was really able to, push them into that win. Mookie Betts had a 2-run home run. A.J. Pollock had a huge 2-run homer himself. Jock Peterson also had a solo home run. So a lot of these guys, big power hitting, huge power hitting. And again, come playoff time, that's going to be crucial. And that's going to be very, very important for this Dodgers team if they want to find themselves back in that World Series position, because I know that they feel like they've been cheated. And they have been cheated, and I know that they want to get back to that position in the season and try and capitalize and show people that they are worthy and deserving of winning a World Series. Next game, Padres Athletics, and this was a battle of 2 of the better teams in their respective West divisions. And the Padres, they manhandled the Athletics 7-0. They beat the Athletics, and if you're the Athletics, I would be a little bit concerned about that, going up against the top tier opponent in the other league and getting shut out like that. That is not a good sign, especially moving into the playoffs. All runs scored for San Diego were from the 5th inning and later, so 4 runs in the 5th inning, 2 in the 7th, and 1 in the 8th. Huge, huge game for them. Tatis Jr. and Manny Machado went back-to-back with home runs. Zach Davies had a really nice job from the mound for the Padres. 6-2 on the year for Davies, while he's got a 2.23 ERA. So again, adding to some of that pitching that they've already added to with picking up Clevinger during the trade deadline, having Zach Davies pitching that well, and then you mix in Clevinger, I think you're going to have a nice, double dynamic rotation with those two guys, and hopefully the other three can kind of fill in where they're needed. Jesus Luzardo got the loss. Jesus Luzardo, he, again, had a really tough outing, 2-2 on the year now. But, I mean, don't let that, I would not take that into heavy consideration, mainly because, I mean, he's going to be very good. I think Luzardo is going to be a very, very, very talented baseball player come, in a couple years from now. I think that if he's able to develop into the player that, people think he's going to develop into, and I personally think he's going to develop into. He's got a great fastball. He throws the ball hard, and he's young. I think Jesus Luzardo is going to be a player that we're going to hear much more about as, years go on. So last game of the evening, Diamondbacks, Giants, a little NL West battle. Both runs for those teams, or both teams scored one run in the first inning. Diamondbacks wound up winning 6-5, though. Ketel Marte had a 4-hit game, and very, very active third, fourth, and fifth innings for both teams. Both teams would score at least one run in that third, fourth, and fifth frames, but it was Arizona who was able to put up, more runs than the Giants. They scored 2 in the fourth as opposed to San Francisco's 1, and 2 in the fifth as opposed to San Francisco's 1. So, again, some really big, solid late, mid-inning, middle of the game hitting for the Diamondbacks. They moved to 15-24. Their playoff hopes are dwindling by the day, and same with the Giants. I mean, they're 18-21, and if they want to have any sort of shot of making it to the playoffs, they're going to have to start picking up the pace of play a little bit, because if not, they're going to be way out of it, and it's going to be a three-way battle with the Padres and Dodgers, and with the way the Rockies have been playing, it might just be a two-way battle between the Padres and the Dodgers. So we'll have to see. I'm really curious to see how that NL West is going to shake out, and the AL Central. Those are two of the more, fascinating divisions in baseball this year, without question. So that's going to do it for us in our first segment, but stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I will be back discussing the biggest three-game series and which teams could have their seasons decided in those few games. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenour with you all, and in our first segment, I kick things off with a recap of games from Friday, September 4th. A lot of good matchups and things going on around the league. Be sure to stay here with us on the GSMC Baseball Podcast for the last few minutes of the show, as I'll get into the potential sites that the playoffs could be held at, and what the postseason and the World Series might look like this year, and where they might be held also. Now, for this segment, I want to get into some interesting series and some 3-game, 4-game series that people should be on the lookout for as the season starts to approach into the playoff time. A couple series that could really make or break some teams' season and really, kind of be the deciding factor for those teams on whether or not they make the playoffs. So the first series that I want to look at, and I think that it could be arguably the most pivotal series that not only these two teams play that, but that, any two teams could really play this entire series, or this season, I should say, and that's the Indians versus the White Sox, a 4-game series coming up on September 21st to September 24th. Two teams that are fighting, and I mean fighting, for that division. They have done a good job of ousting the Twins of that first-place spot and have knocked them into third, and we will touch on the Twins in a little bit. All three of these teams are really going to have, very pivotal series against one another as the season moves forward. The Indians have been incredible on the mound. Second-best team ERA with a 2.74 clip, and second in the league in team strikeouts with 377. So no question the pitching has been there. On the other hand, the White Sox have started to get the bats going, with players like Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson starting to get things rolling at the plate. The Indians have been the leader in the head-to-head matchup this season between the two teams, with the Indians edging out the White Sox 4-2 on the season. So in that respect, this Indians team should take down the White Sox, but don't go so fast, because the White Sox, have just recently woken up. They really have, and they are here to stay, I think. Since their last series against the Indians, they have gone 14-7 and have compiled a 7-game winning streak in those last 21 games. So they have considerably turned things around, but they are going to need to keep that momentum going because the Indians are showing no signs of slowing down either. They have only 7 losses since these two teams last met up themselves. So two very hot teams right now that are going to keep going toe-to-toe with one another because, like I said, they have the Twins out of the way for right now and for the most part. Currently, the Indians are sitting in first place with only a 1-game lead over the White Sox, and with Tim Anderson hitting .342 and Jose Abreu hitting .314, not to mention Luis Robert. I mean, he's been on a tear, and he is someone I was very wrong about. I didn't realize how good he really was. So having those three mixed in with Eloy Jimenez, who has the second most home runs with 11 on the team, behind Abreu, who has 12. So just a few of the main reasons why this team has the third highest batting average as a team in the league and sitting in second place for most home runs as a team in the league as well. This will be a down-to-the-wire finish in the Central, and with this series coming in the last week of the season, be prepared to watch an intense 4-game series between these two teams. I really am excited to watch that series come later September. The next series that everybody should keep an eye out for is the Padres vs. Dodgers 3-game series from September 14th to September 16th. The Padres, the Padres, the Padres. Let me tell you what, folks, I think if the Padres keep up this level of play, we'll have, they'll definitely have the Dodgers shaking, and this series right in the middle of the month of September, a few weeks before the final week of the season. This could be a turning of the tide in the West if the Padres are able to walk away with either a 3-game sweep or winning 2 of 3. These two teams are sitting atop the leaderboard in team home runs, so easily two of the stronger hitting teams that will be going at it come September 14th. The Padres led the season head-to-head matchup, or currently lead the season head-to-head matchup 4-2, and this will be the last series on the year that these two teams will face off coming up on September 14th. So there is a lot riding on this 3-game series, mainly because if either team wants to try and really separate themselves from one another, these games will be crucial for that to happen. The Dodgers, however, do have one of the best pitching staffs in the entire MLB, leading the league in both team ERA and wins as well. But San Diego did do a lot of adding during the trade deadline, as we all know, picking up Mike Clevenger from the Indians and Trevor Rosenthal from the Royals, two formidable pitchers in their respective roles that could be the pieces that this Padres team has been missing and have been missing all year long. Although the Dodgers pitching has been lights out, Drew Pomeranz has been doing a phenomenal job in his new closer role, which could pose to be an issue for the Dodgers. The Dodgers as a whole, as an entire team, have hit 172 this year in the 9th inning, and it drops from 268 to 172 from the 8th to 9th inning. Now, they have significantly fewer at-bats in the 9th inning, showing that they, tend to close things out in the top of the 9th at home potentially, or they are not in a position to have to come back in a game. But with Pomeranz pitching so well this year, they could find themselves down in the 9th. And they could be in big trouble if they run into Drew Pomeranz down a couple runs in that top 9 or bottom 9 frame. The Padres have their 2 to 5 hole hitters batting over 300, and Machado has started getting his bat going again, batting over 300. And with the addition of Austin Nola, who's also a 300 hitter, and Mitch Moreland in their lineup, they just made themselves that much more dangerous. I mean, adding those two guys, Mitch Moreland having over an 1,100 OPS this year, adding that much power to an already powerful lineup, they're starting to rival the Dodgers for the best lineup in the NL. This will be a fun one to watch, and it will be interesting to see how the two teams, play after they face off against each other. So we'll see how not only that series kind of dictates how those two teams play for the rest of the season, but what their play will be like after those two teams meet each other for the last time in the season. How will their seasons kind of unfold? Will the Padres continue on a roll if they beat the Dodgers in a 3-game series, 2 games to 3, or sweeping them all 3, or will they start to fall a little bit? Maybe they'll get a little bit too, confident, and then all of a sudden they start to kind of downfall a little bit? Or will the Dodgers, if they bounce back from losing 2 out of 3 or getting swept, will they just start to ascend their normal way? Or, are they going to show their dominance and sweep the Padres and then continue on, to steamroll ahead to take that first place spot? I'm really excited to see that series. Next series, I should say, Marlins versus Braves, 4-game series from September 21st to September 24th. So again, a lot of really good series coming down the road here in September that, again, could dictate a lot of teams' future come October. Miami has started to slip, and with the Braves 4 games ahead of the Marlins, and the Marlins are 1.5 games behind the Phillies, this 4-game series will be beyond important. It's going to be massive for them if they want to find themselves in any sort of playoff situation. With Miami missing a good chunk of the season because of positive tests from their players and team personnel of the coronavirus, yet they have still found themselves somehow, some way in a situation that could place them in the playoffs. The Braves, they've been lights out this year, and they, for whatever reason, they're always a team that can get things done. They're a great organization. They are ran very well from top to bottom. They've got a lot of great young players in that team. But again, they have numerous guys, as always, hitting for great percentages on the year. Travis d'Arnaud hitting for over 300. Freddie Freeman doing his usual thing, hitting above 300. He's got 22 RBIs on the season as well. And Marcell Ozuna, who has been huge for them. Now that he doesn't have to be in the field, which has allowed him to focus on hitting, and it saves himself for his trips to the plate, which has paid dividends for him. I mean, it is shown with 12 home runs and 31 RBIs this year. Yes, he's got 31 RBIs, one of the few guys in the MLB to have 30-plus RBIs. That's a lot. That is a lot of RBIs to have in just not even 60 games, in about 30, 35 games. He's been a tank for them. And with Miami not having, one player who is hitting above 300 in the first 9 guys, that doesn't look good for the Marlins. But they did have a huge pickup in Starling Marte, who's been hitting well above 300 and having really a career year, if that. Miguel Rojas has also been a bright spot in the lineup, but he's only played in 15 games. So their offensive production hasn't been great, but guys like Brian Anderson, he's been fairly good, and good pieces like him, that's going to really help them out this year. He hasn't been hitting well, that is Brian Anderson, but I think that, as we encroach upon the final weeks of the season, look to see Miami wake up a little bit, look to see, Brian Anderson start to get things going again, because he was hitting, well above a 280, 290%. Also Jesus Aguilar, and we'll see how Starling Marte, who's already hit a home run in his new team. So, that could be, again, something that could really unfold in their favor if, they start. I mean, you always hear about a team that they pick up somebody at the trade deadline, and they're kind of on the fringe. They're kind of a fringe playoff team, and they pick up that one guy or two guys, and then all of a sudden, boom, they just take off, and it propels them and it guides them into the playoffs. An example to use, CC Sabathia, when he went to the Milwaukee Brewers in 2008, I believe it was, he was there for half a year. He wasn't even there the entire season. And they were a fringe team. They picked him up midway through the year, and then all of a sudden it skyrocketed, and they were able to win the wild card, and they were able to go to the playoffs. So could we see that same effect? Now, I'm not saying that the Marlins are going to win the NL East per se, but I could see them potentially coming out with, at least maybe a wild card spot, maybe that second wild card spot if they're lucky, but they really have to at least take 2 or 3 out of the 4 against the Braves in this 4-game series, because if not, it's going to just separate them even more. Because if you think about it, if they're able to at least gain some ground on the Braves, that means the Phillies could maybe gain some ground also on the Braves if they win those series games. And if that happens, it'll kind of be a trickle-down effect, similar to how we see in the Central with, the Indians and the White Sox starting to win. It kind of starts to push the Twins out, and maybe we'll see that. Again, we still have a good bit of baseball left, but right now, just keep your eye on for that Marlins-Braves series coming up on September 21st. Next one, Orioles versus Rays, a 5-game series. Yes, there's going to be a doubleheader, 2 7-inning games, and then 3 other games on top of that. That is starting on September 17th, going to September 20th. I know I have talked a lot about the Orioles, but it's for good reason. I mean, this has been some of the most promising baseball the Birds have played in quite some time. So they are hungry, and they have a really good opportunity here to make some noise. Now, I don't think they will catch the Rays, but theoretically speaking, a 5-game sweep of the Rays would have to put them in some sort of playoff conversation, whether that is the division or the wild card, whatever it might be. The Birds have been surprising everyone from the plate this season, having the 4th highest team batting average and 11th best OPS. So this team has been fun to watch. They've got a lot of power, and they've got a nice core group of guys that they're going to start, I hope at least, just for that organization's sake, that they're able to build around that core group of guys for not only this year but for years to come. On the other hand, though, the Rays have been unstoppable the last few weeks. They have taken the first-place spot from the injury-ridden Yankees and look to win this division, really. I mean, I do believe that the Rays will actually win this division, and I think that they could dethrone the Yankees. They've already done it, and all they have to do is just keep putting their foot on that gas pedal and do not stop this momentum. Now, I will say the Orioles did complete a 3-game sweep of the Rays earlier in the season, so this idea of them sweeping Tampa is not completely out of the question. They have proven it already that they can take them down. They currently lead the season head-to-head matchup 3-2. There was one game that was, postponed, so it could be 4-2 or it could be an even 3-3. However, the Rays were one of the hottest, if not the hottest teams in August with a 21-7 record. Only 7 losses the entire month, so no wonder they have taken sole possession of first place. The Orioles have been struggling as of late, winning only 2 games in their last 8, so they are going to need to, wake the bats up a little bit and try to grind out a couple wins before they run into the Rays, because they do not want to find themselves in any, deeper hole than they are now, because when they run into Tampa, it's going to be at the point where it might be too late for Baltimore. The Orioles have a couple big games coming up against the Yankees, so it will be important for them to come out with an above 500 winning percentage in the next few games over, against New York, because if they are not, again, going to be able to do that, then they're not going to be able to get out of the hole that they, are in right now. And if they can't climb out of that hole, well, they can kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. They have really slipped after the month. They just had, a falling to 4th place. I mean, they were riding high in July and, midway through August, and then all of a sudden they just started to descend a little bit, and they started to go down on a little decline. The Blue Jays started to get hot, and as they went up, the Orioles went down, and so you went from Yankees, Rays, and then Orioles to now Rays, Yankees, Blue Jays, Orioles. So now they're sitting in 4th place. But again, if they can come after the Blue Jays, who, they do have, a couple games left against the Blue Jays. I believe actually their last series this season is against the Blue Jays. They're 4.5 games ahead of the Orioles. That's the Blue Jays. They could put themselves in a better position to, maybe make the playoffs through a wild card spot if they can take at least, 3 of 4 of the 5 against the Rays come September 17th. But this Orioles team is going to have to play nearly perfect baseball the rest of the way if they really want to find themselves in an actual legitimate, playoff spot. I do think that is a very attainable thing for them. Again, I think that they're very similar to how the Marlins are. I think that if they start to play better and if they start to go on some sort of, 20-10, tear over the next 30 games, or obviously not 30 games left, but 15-7 over the next 23 games, or whatever that might, or 22 games, whatever that might be, then they can maybe start to look at the wild card. I just don't think that the division is in their control right now, but I do think that if they are able to put on at least, a 500 or better record, they're going to have to at least be 500 if they want to even have a chance at the wild card. So we'll see what happens with that series. Again, a 5-game series that's going to be really big for the Orioles. And the next one, really, I'm kind of bundling these 2 series together, because for the Twins, they're actually back-to-back series. So the Twins first play the Indians in a 3-game series on September 11th to September 13th, and then they go and play the White Sox in a 4-game series on September 14th to September 17th. So in 7 games, in about a week, they're playing. The top 3 teams in the Central are playing against each other. The Twins are playing the Indians, and the Twins are playing the White Sox. Now, again, like I said, I'm going to group these last 2 series together, because for the Twins, they're back-to-back series. They're going to be, potentially make or break for them if they want to reclaim their hold on the first place spot in the AL Central. The Twins have fallen on hard times recently. While the Indians and the White Sox have started to really heat up, they recently dropped 2 of 3 against the Indians, but they did win 2 of 3 against the White Sox. And they have had their way with Chicago this year, winning 4 of 6 matchups against them. So it's not out of the question for the Twins to take 3 of 4 against the White Sox. But how will they respond in the first series against the Indians? Because that is going to be the do or die situation, in my opinion. This is by far the most interesting division in baseball, mainly because there are legitimately 3 teams that are all fighting for first place. Yes, the NL West has been great, but the Rockies and Giants are so up and down, whereas these 3 teams have all been very consistent all year long. The Twins are one of the most disciplined defensive teams in the league as well, with the league's fewest amount of team errors with 11, whereas Chicago is in the top 10 in that category. The Indians are also a very good fielding team, and if the White Sox, start slipping up at any point, they could be in for a rude awakening come playoff time when they, see that they are not in that first place or second place spot. I know I said earlier in the year that the Twins would have, the best shot and would probably win this division. But the Indians and White Sox have ratcheted up a notch, and if they continue to play the way they have, this is going to be an uphill battle for the Twins. There is no question about that. But I am really excited to see these two series, and, not only the two series, but they are back-to-back, which is going to be even bigger for the Twins. And this is a point of the season that they don't want to, and they won't be able to, take their foot off the gas at all. If they do, if they win 5 of those 7 or 6 of those 7, the Twins cannot let up on that gas pedal, because if they do, the Indians and the White Sox will catch them. The Indians and White Sox have been playing such good baseball this year, and they have proven and they have shown that at any sort of point, if the Twins go on any sort of slump, they will take that first place spot, because that is exactly what has happened. So if the Twins can come out in the positive in terms of winning more than they lose, they could find themselves back in their first place spot come postseason time. But again, it's going to be some nearly perfect baseball for them to play. And again, that's not out of the question for them. They're a very good team. They've been very good all year long. So if they can continue to ride that momentum and ride that wave into the postseason a little bit, they could regain the division. But again, if not, I could totally see them taking at least a wild card spot. A lot of good series to look forward to this season. I think we have seen a pretty solid season so far, but I also think that things are just getting started, and we will see an even more entertaining second half of the year that could feature a lot of shifting and changing in the standings as well. So everybody out there, be sure to be on the lookout for these series coming up down the road in September. September, this is where things are going to start getting interesting for baseball, and we might start seeing some shifting around in these divisions and some maneuvering amongst these teams in terms of who's going to be making the playoffs. So that will close things out here for us in our second segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial break, I'll share my Futures All-Star team that I selected, featuring the top 25 and under players in the league this year, and who I would select to field that team. Folks, it's been a lot of fun so far, but we got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all still here with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and we just finished up discussing the series to look forward to as the season moves on, and which 3 to 4 game series could potentially make or break a team's season. I want to now jump into a new topic and select my Futures All-Star team, fielding an All-Star team for the best 25 and under players in the MLB season. Now, I know I did an all-star team for the AL and NL a few episodes ago, but I want to focus on just the top 25 and under players in the league and select players from both the AL and NL and which players I could see being the future of the MLB. So the first player, Kyle Lewis, outfielder, unbelievable player for the Seattle Mariners, and I have raved about this player all season long. He is one of my favorite young players in the MLB, as he is right at 25 years old. In 2019, he put up some, very good numbers during his stint in the majors. In the 18 games he played, he hit .268 with an .885 OPS, and he hit 6 homers. So a pretty consistent power hitter when you are hitting, a home run pretty much every 3 games. His OPS plus was also fairly solid at 132. A player who is very offensive-minded, generates a ton of offense for his team, and with this Mariners team being one of the worst teams in scoring runs in the MLB, having Lewis on your roster adds a lot of offensive pop for their lineup. This year, Lewis's batting average is up 60 points at .328, and he has 8 homers in 36 games with 21 RBIs. So again, proving why he is able to score so many runs for this team, his OPS plus numbers is through the roof this year, being up over 30 points from a year ago, with him holding a 164 OPS plus this season. Another thing to note is although his strikeouts have gone up some, the increase has been minor in comparison to the increase in walks this year from last year. With only 3 walks last year, Lewis has been taking his time at the plate much more this season, as his walks are up 21 this season. So he's already gotten, he's gone up 7 times the amount of walks that he had a year ago to this year. So a great improvement, a really nice adjustment for him from the plate. A solid fielder who only has 2 errors in the outfield this year, mixed with his improvement in hitting and patience at the plate, shows why Lewis makes his futures team, and really it should be part of this futures team and will be one of the top outfielders for many years to come in the MLB. Next player, shortstop, I think everybody should know who this would be, Fernando Tatis. I feel like at any time you turn the TV on or the radio or really any sort of media outlet, you will at least see one thing pertaining to Tatis. I mean, the guy has been playing out of his mind this year. The league leader in home runs this year with 13 and 34 RBIs, which leads the NL. It is no wonder the 21-year-old power-hitting shortstop makes this team and would make really any top-tier rankings of the MLB's young stars. Tatis has the potential, I think, to be the face of baseball. He has a personality, he's fun to watch, great player, and he plays with passion, which I think propels his level of play even further. With 98 total bases, he is a huge hitter for San Diego, and with a 1.028 OPS and an OPS plus of 177, he's putting up numbers that not many 21-year-olds can do. I mean, those are some staggering hitting statistics for him to be putting up, especially in only his second year in the MLB, and he's 21 years old. Last year, he proved his abilities with a .317 batting average in 84 games, and with over 100 hits in those 84 contests and 22 homers with 53 RBIs. I mean, imagine if he played an entire 162-game season and what his numbers would look like. Unbelievable. They would be out of bounds. He has drastically improved the fielding this year with only 1 error all year this season, as opposed to 18 that he had last year. With the sharper fielding and continued power hitting, this is the beginning to a future of a future Hall of Fame career, a future of the MLB type of career. And if he continues to play at the level he's playing right now, Tatis could be one of the best players of this generation. I mean, I really do believe that. I mean, he's got the making, he's got the potential, he's got the ability to be that good. So, again, I'm putting him in my Futures All-Star game because he's very deserving of it. Next guy, Shane Bieber. I mean, as the pitcher, the most dominant pitcher in the AL this year, a player that I think will win the Cy Young based on his season, and he has had a remarkable season to prove he is worthy of that award. Being one of only 2 pitchers in the entire MLB to have a 6-0 record, and with an MLB high 1.20 ERA, Bieber has been sitting batters down left and right this year. Where he stands out this year is the strikeout numbers, especially with 84 this year, which leads the MLB. He isn't in a ton of competition really, because the next person behind him, who is Lucas Giolito, he only has 66. So a clear drop-off from first to second place in terms of power hit pitching numbers. He also has been consistent the whole year with the quality of starts, as he has registered a league-high 8 quality starts, meaning he went 6 innings or longer and gave up 3 earned runs or fewer. So again, very productive, very efficient, and just somebody who is going to get in and get out of innings very, very quickly. His strikeout-to-walk ratio is an insane 6.46, which for starting pitchers is one of the best ratios in the league. He's been the face of this Indians rotation that, although they just lost Mike Clevenger, have the makings of one of the best rotations in the entire league and could help this Cleveland team make a legitimate playoff run. I really do believe that. Bieber has tossed the second most innings this year, and he has shown no signs of struggle or fatigue. However, the Indians may want to start reconsidering keeping him in for any long games if it is a clear blowout, because a pitcher with that many innings in only 8 games, he could be prone to getting burned out towards the postseason. But he has shown, no signs of that so far, and hopefully he can continue that going forward, because if anything were to happen to Shane Bieber, I really do believe that the Indians would be in a large amount of trouble this season. Next player, and he's a shortstop, but I'm moving him to third base because I didn't feel the third base position was crazy strong. in terms of 25 and under top tier players, but with his ability and with his talent, you have to put him on this list. You have to put him on this team. Bo Bichette. Like Lewis, I'm a big fan of Bichette, and although him and Tatis are both shortstops, I decided to put, like I said, Bichette at third for this Futures All-Star team because, he's deserving of. He's been that good this year. He's batting .361 this season with which is 50 points higher than his batting average a year ago, which was .311. He only appeared in 46 games last year, and he's only played in 14 this season. He's battled an injury this year, but he's got so much promise and potential, you can't ignore him. You really can't. And his 1.063 OPS is the highest on the team for players who have 60 or more at-bats this year so far. So again, he's consistent and, he's legit. It's not like somebody who's got an over 1,000 OPS and just 14 at-bats and everybody's raving about them. He's logged in a good bit of at-bats at the professional level, and he's never batted below 300. He's proved it. He did it last year, and he's doing it right now. Again, how is he going to be able to respond from injuries? Is he going to be able to not be as injury-prone? We'll have to see about that, but I think that he has the talent and the ability to be really, really good. Like Tatis, he has a lot of pop in his bat for a middle infielder, and he could become, the AL version of Tatis, which I think would be a fun little battle in the MLB. Which young shortstop will be the better player or better hitter? Too bad they aren't in the same division or the same league, because that would make for a great playoff race. For I feel one day. If one of them were to cross over into the other's division and they go head to head, I think that those two would be the face of the shortstop position. They're that good, and Tatis, he's talked about a lot more this year, especially with his team being good. But Bo Bichette, he should be given all the credit in the world because he is playing that well, and he's somebody that, even when you turn on ESPN or MLB Network or whatever sort of outlet you're watching, you'll hear about Bichette, and he is that good. And everybody else agrees. Experts agree, scouts agree. He has the potential to be, a shortstop that is in this league and plays at a very high level for many, many years. As a 22-year-old, Bichette has played as if he's been in the league for years, and with his fielding still improving, it doesn't necessarily put him in the Tatis conversation, but when he is healthy and when the fielding has figured itself out, watch out, Fernando, because you won't be the only standout shortstop in the MLB. Next position, first base, Cody Bellinger. And this was a tough position to pick because the two players I chose from, Pete Alonso and Cody Bellinger, neither one of them are hitting well at all. And as a result, it made it challenging to pick one solid first baseman, but I'm going to go with Bellinger this year because his numbers are a tad better. Although both of them have 22 RBIs, Cody has two more home runs than Pete, and their batting averages, although awfully similar, Bellinger edges him out in that category as well. Coming off an MVP year, it is no question that Cody Bellinger is one of the best players in the league in the making right now. And he has proved his ability as a top-tier hitter. It's just a matter of consistency with him. Their average has bounced around and stayed around, 260 for two of his first 4 years in the league, or I should say his average bounced around between that, 260 or so in half of the time he's been in the majors. But with a 305 average last year and a 1.035 OPS, he exploded onto the scene, and he tossed in a casual 47 home runs and 115 RBIs. So his power numbers are also there. He's 24 years old and has many years ahead of him of great hitting, and he's a pretty solid fielder as well. So a player that is a very versatile and has been one of the focal points to this Dodgers offense. His numbers are down this year, and he has had a history of injuries as well, but the potential in Bellinger is so astronomical that you can't disregard him, and you can't look too much into this year, really. Wait till next year when things are hopefully back to normal. I bet we will see the Bellinger of 2019. Next player in the outfield, Juan Soto. He is by far the most fearless 25 and under baseball player in the league, and he might be the most fearless one in all of history, really. At 21 years old, he was staring down Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole in the World Series, stepping up to the plate with absolutely no fear at all. To have that confidence and that level of belief in yourself at that age and at that stage as well, wow, if you weren't destined for a long and dominating career, then I don't know what you're destined for. With career highs in slugging at .758 this year and OPS with a 1.211 clip, and both of those stats, again, they're leading the entire MLB, it is no shock that people look at him as a top-tier young star in the majors and someone who may be an MVP sooner rather than later. He has 11 home runs and 26 RBIs with a .354 batting average, and his OPS plus is also a league high at .213. The power is in his bat, and it is the fielding that I think needs to get figured out a little bit. He isn't awful, but there are times he will misread a ball, or he doesn't properly attack a fly ball that ultimately either leads to the ball either dropping in front of him or going way over his head. So I think that the fielding aspect might need to start to get sharpened up and become a little bit crisper for him. But the hitting is there. There's no really needed. I feel, you can always improve, but I don't think there's any drastic improvement in his hitting. That is not a sore spot of his game. As he continues to improve and mature, you will see Soto definitely get better in the field. And the hitting, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere. What's even more frightening, even if a manager tries to go into a game facing off against Soto, he can't strategically plan to throw a lefty against the left-handed slugger because he bats .355 this season against left-handed pitchers. But I will say his average dropped significantly from August to September. Now, we just started September, so we can't jump to any conclusions. But Soto is going to need to keep this, play up the rest of the season if he wants to keep these numbers up that he has been displaying this entire season. Next player, second baseman, Ozzy Albies. Albies entered the MLB with a splash, and he's been incredible ever since making his debut back in 2017. This year, he hasn't been performing like his usual self, only hitting .159 with a deplorable .468 OPS and a .22 OPS plus, which is absolutely horrendous. So the no power numbers are, they're way down. The power numbers are clearly not where they were last year, or not where they're supposed to be. And, it's not usually his main thing, but he can definitely bring those numbers up. His contact numbers are also down. Only 7 hits this entire year and 44 at-bats, and he's got 6 RBIs on the year. Again, not great this year, but if you look at his numbers the last few years, you see why he's looked at as one of the up-and-coming second basemen and really players in the MLB. His WAR is at a career low, falling in the negative of a negative 0.3, whereas last year he was at a 5.2 WAR. And that's a huge difference. That is a ginormous difference. And if you're having a 5 or higher WAR, you're a top-tier all-star caliber player. You are making a huge difference for your team. He led the NL in at-bats last year and in hits. He almost had 200 hits last year as a 22-year-old, which is pretty incredible. And this year, the numbers, they've taken a dive downwards, but if you give him a whole season worth of play, this could be a wildly different set of statistics for Albies, not only this, if it was a normal year for this year, but in years to come when things are back to normal in baseball, we're going to start to see Ozzy Albies wake up a little bit, and we will see the Albies that he's been in previous years. Next player at the catcher position, another weak position, I feel, 25 and under-wise, and that's Will Smith. I think that he is, at that position, the best option in terms of, top-tier catchers that are 25 and under. And he really is. He isn't hitting well at all this year. He's only hitting 208 from the plate, but his power numbers are pretty solid. He's got an 876 OPS, and he's got a 138 OPS plus. He played in 54 games last year, and he hit 253 from the plate, but his slugging percentage was .571. So for a catcher to have that kind of power, that's a hidden gem for sure. If he can figure out the consistency a little bit, this could be a player that would be a really nice piece to the Dodgers lineup for the next few years. Especially since you don't have a whole bunch of big-time power-hitting catchers in the league right now. If he can develop the power hitting a little bit and, maybe start to, add another dimension to his game. He's a pretty solid fielder. He's pretty solid behind the plate, and he's a good, solid, a consistent catcher that is tough. He comes in, plays every single game that he starts, and he does a really nice job. I think that, again, if you look at his numbers on paper this year, they're not great, but if you look at the things he does outside of the statistics, I think that you could see why, you could see why he would be somebody that would be at least considered for 25 and under top-tier catchers in the MLB. If he's able to bring up the home runs and bring up the RBIs to, at least a decent level, and if he can bring the average up and keep that slugging percentage where it's at, he could potentially be a secret weapon in this power-heavy Dodgers lineup down the road. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Will Smith, and not the actor, but the baseball player, is going to develop and perform as a player for the Dodgers moving forward. Last player on this Futures All-Star team that I've selected, Ronald Acuna Jr., making it the final outfield piece. And like Albies, another young star in the making who the Braves are lucky to have. Because at 22, Acuna could see himself as one of the main staples of this Braves team as time goes on. He's hitting only 14 points lower than he was last year, which this year, him hitting 266, that's still a pretty solid spot. And again, as time goes on, we're going to start seeing batting average kind of fall to the wayside, and then we'll start to see OPS rise up a little bit more as, teams start to go towards this kind of power hitting idea and power hitting philosophy from the plate. Again, his OPS numbers, they are very high. I mean, they're the highest they have been in his career, actually, at 921. And his OPS plus is at a steady 139. With only 10 RBIs this year, he does have the ability to drive in a ton of runs. He showed it last year with him hitting 41 home runs and 101 RBIs. He drove in 101 runs at early 20s. That's insane. That is, I mean, again, we saw a lot of unbelievable feats be conquered last year. Pete Alonso hitting 53 homers. And now, again, we see someone right here, Ronald Acuna, with 101 RBIs. Again, these guys are very talented, and I think that the future of baseball is in very good hands. I think we're going to see some really good players down the road. And not to mention, Acuna stole an NL high 37 bases last year. So a threat not only at the plate, but he is also a major asset on the base path. Because you have to think, if he gets on base, there's a chance that he could steal and advance over, and he was only caught 9 times stealing last year. So someone who is also a very smart base runner, and his WAR, like Acuna's, was above 5 last year. But this year it is way down at 0.6. So although this may not look like the year Acuna wants to have or is used to having, the future looks bright for this 22-year-old slugger and star in the making. No question about it. I'm really excited not only to see how Albies and Acuna kind of develop, but how that entire Braves team kind of starts to change and start to, the trend starts to take a different direction, mainly because, as time goes on, Freddie Freeman will get old. Freddie Freeman will start to age out. So we'll start to see Dansby Swanson, who's another guy that, unfortunately did not make this list, but he would be an honorable mention because he's been playing very good this year. He's been having a really, really nice year this year. I mean, much better than he's been having last year. And what was unfortunate with Dansby last year was he was hitting pretty well until he got injured. And it's just going to be a matter of, can these guys stay healthy? And if they can, then this Braves team, I really do think down the road, maybe the next 4 or 5 years, they're going to be a top-tier contender in the league. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks again for sticking around. Stay right there because we'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, which will feature a discussion on the potential off-sites for the postseason this year and where we may see the World Series and playoffs being held this season. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we have one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The lectest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you, and in the last segment, I selected my Futures All-Star team, selecting the 25 and under All-Star team for this season, picking the top young players in the MLB, and fielding an All-Star team with them. I want to now get into a discussion of the idea of hub cities for the MLB playoffs, some things that could work, not work, how other leagues have fared with them, and just investigate into this concept that baseball might start themselves. Now, recently in the news, the MLB has decided, or has at least thrown out the idea of possibly holding the playoffs and the World Series in off-sites and having basically kind of a bubble system like how the NBA and the NHL has had. Now, I personally think that would be a great idea. And I think a lot of people, before the season started, I actually had many people ask me, hey, do you think that they would have, a bubble for the entire regular season? No, that would have been completely out of the question. I feel like I've mentioned that many times on the show. It just would not have worked. It would not have been feasible to do simply because how are you going to house that many people? I mean, you have to think about it. It's going to be at least 1,000 people that you would have to fit into a bubble. Whereas with the NHL and with the NBA, it's a little bit different. They don't have nearly as many players, as many coaches, as many personnel, so on and so forth. So they don't have to worry about as many people, inside of the bubble and having to contain people in 1 or 2 central locations. So a developing story kind of, and they're probably going to move forward with this, is that the postseason postseason would basically be held in two different offsites. One of them, the NL, would be held in Arlington and Houston, while the AL playoffs would be held in San Diego and Los Angeles. Now, a lot of thinking has gone into this, mainly because they want to find a place that is going to be, have acceptable weather during that period of time. They want to make sure that, any sort of weather weather issues that come up, that they can be possibly avoided with a retractable dome. The weather will be nicer come, the cooler months with October. The weather usually gets a little bit colder, so in Texas and in California won't be as big of an issue, right? So I think that will be a really great idea. I think that's really going to work, and I think that it's going to also it's going to allow for less worry, I think, of the spread of the virus, but there's a caveat with that, and that is if guys can keep themselves following protocol, follow the guidelines, and make sure that they uphold themselves and they're responsible to not go out and late at night and come back and potentially infect one person, and then it just spreads from there. I was reading a lot of articles about this, and one of the articles were saying that the biggest thing is right now, and as we've seen, if one person or there's a little outbreak in the MLB, usually you can then, kind of trace it back to the origin, to the original team who had it, and then kind of go from there and see, okay, let's do some, contact tracing, who last came in contact with them, who came in contact with them before, who came in contact with this other team, and then they can kind of go from there and pinpoint the origin of the virus and the outbreak, and then get rid of it and be able to cancel games and go from there. So I think that if guys are able to follow those protocols and follow those rules and those regulations, there should be no issues. But as we've seen, there has been a lot of guys that have not followed those guidelines. They have not followed those rules. And one of them, which is, I think, semi-ironic that this will be probably something that will happen at some point, I believe, with the playoffs, if his team does continue on the way they have, the San Diego Padres picking up Mike Clevinger during the trade deadline, and we all know the issue that Mike Clevinger had, him and Zach Plesac, both when, Clevinger was with the Indians and Plesac earlier in the season, they went out in Chicago and they came back, lied about it, had a little bit of an issue inside of their, locker room and their clubhouse, and the organization, the team were, they were not happy with them. So again, guys like Clevinger that are going to be in these bubbles, that are going to be in these hub cities, they have to be very careful. They cannot allow themselves to get complacent. Oh, I've already taken the test a couple times. I'm okay. There's no worries. I'm not worried about it. No, you can't do that, because if you do, and if you become complacent and comfortable, and then you go out, all of a sudden one person gets it, and then it spreads like wildfire. And I know I've brought this up before, and I'm going to bring it up again because it's a very interesting hypothetical in my opinion, and is, what if there's an outbreak during the MLB playoffs? What if somebody does go out during the NLCS, let's say, and they go out somewhere in Houston, and all of a sudden they come back, they might be asymptomatic, but they pass something along to somebody else, they test positive, and it's Game 7 of the NLCS. What are you going to do? I mean, you'd obviously have to cancel the game, but are you going to reschedule it? Are the playoffs going to be pushed even further? And I think that is why they probably went into this a little bit of, hey, let's find cities where the weather will be ideal in case of the scenario or the issue of somebody getting it, contracting the virus, and then spreading it, and then we have to subsequently cancel games or move games around or whatever. It wouldn't be a matter of, okay, we're up against the clock right now, we're up against the seasons, it's getting colder, snow's going to start coming, and then it's just going to delay things even more. So they probably went into it with, we need to find somewhere where the weather is 55, 60, 65 degrees the entire year at the bare minimum, and there's no snow. And Texas and California are two prime locations for that. Now, I did see a lot of things, and I think they were just speculations, and they were just kind of ideas, if you will, about other hub cities. A couple of them were very interesting, New York being one of them. I think that maybe would have worked. I mean, obviously having the two stadiums with the Yankees and the Mets, but again, New York has been a hotbed for this thing, and with how condensed things are in New York, and Texas is much more widespread, and so is California. So it would be easier for them to be able to minimize the contact and the spread by being able to spread people out. Guys in Houston, when they go and find, a hotel to house Team A, Team B, Team C, and Team D or whatever, it's going to be easier for them to spread everybody out and make sure that nobody comes into any sort of out-of-game contact with one another. Whereas in New York City, it's a little bit more condensed. Everybody's on top of each other. There's no way of really avoiding any of that, honestly. And again, with it being such a hotbed of this virus, I think it would be walking into a nightmare. It would really be walking into a nightmare. So I think that New York was, a halfway decent idea, mainly because of the fact of, it's two stadiums and they could house that. But again, just with the weather too, it's going to get cold in New York. Now, another two cities that was very interesting and would probably work, but again, the weather would be a factor, Milwaukee and Chicago. Now, Milwaukee has a retractable dome, so Milwaukee could theoretically house these playoffs, because even if it is freezing cold, even if the weather does get bad, even if there's a massive snowstorm or blizzard, it wouldn't matter, because they have the retractable dome and they can crank the heat up, they can do whatever they need to do to make it, comfortable inside of the stadium for the players, coaches, and personnel. Now, in Chicago, a little bit of a different story. But they're two cities that are about an hour away from each other, not very far at all. So an easy drive would be easy to commute, but it would also be easy for the two, AL and NL. They wouldn't be that far away from each other. So, again, it would be kind of an ideal location. I tried to come up with some other ones that could potentially work, some other stadiums. Florida, maybe, but the thing is, maybe Florida could maybe work, because you would have maybe the AL and the NL over in Tampa Bay, and then in Miami, in the AL, you'd have Tampa Bay, in the NL, you'd have Miami, or vice versa, whatever it might be. You could theoretically do that. Now, the problem is, though, these, initial playoff rounds, they're going to need more stadiums. They're going to need, an extra two stadiums, and that's why, LA and San Diego are options for the American League playoffs, just like in Texas. And for the National League, the Arlington and Houston are two options, because there's going to be 16 teams. You can't have 16 teams use just two ballparks. You're going to have to spread it out a little bit better. So I do think that if it could be, a possibility that Florida would maybe be an area where they would possibly house a hub city, if you will. But a lot of it is going to have to do with the weather. And Kansas City and St. Louis, it's another scenario, similar to how Chicago and Milwaukee are, not too far away. A highway system, separates them. It's not a very far drive for either team, or for, if either league were to have their playoffs, it would not be that far. But again, it's only two stadiums. And the ideal thing about California, you've got many different ballparks. You have two in LA, you've got one in San Diego, and then in Texas, you've got Arlington and you've got Houston, both for the Rangers and the Astros. Bigger, more spread out, and it would be easier for, players to not have to come in contact with one another. Now, these other leagues have actually done a pretty good job. The NBA has done a fantastic job. They've had literally no cases at all while in the bubble. The NHL, same thing. They've had little to no cases themselves. So it is a system that works. It is something that is proven, and it does work. Again, the MLB was not going to be able to do that in the regular season, because there just would not have been, it would have probably taken them a year to plan this out. And back in, a year ago, nobody on this earth knew that this was going to be a reality a year later. So again, the planning was just not there, but also the fact that you have, and I've talked to many people. I've got friends that are in baseball in some sort of capacity, whether it's working in front management or, front office, statistics, analytics, what have you. And all of them have told me and said it would not have worked. It would have been a nice idea, and it would have theoretically worked, because the idea of the bubble and the hub city does work, as we've seen in other leagues. But being able to house 1,000 teams, because I'll break it down. You bring in, whatever the roster was this year. I don't have it in front of me. I think you're allowed to bring 30 players. So you bring in 30, or we'll just leave it at 30, a nice round number. So 30 players right there, multiply that by 30 or so teams. So now you've got easily over almost 1,000 players right there. Now you've got managers, you've got bench coaches, you've got first base coaches, third base coaches, you've got hitting coaches, pitching coaches, you've also got personnel of any sort that is going to join, you've got athletic training that's going to join, and you've got to multiply all of that by 30 different teams because they would all have to bring their own personnel. They'd have to bring their own, people with them. So I just don't know if that would have added up well for the MLB if they had done that. I think they would have probably ran into a lot of issues. But I do think that ultimately them having the playoffs and the World Series in the hub cities will work. I think that having them in San Diego and LA is great. I think having them in Arlington and Houston is great. I've even seen things where the World Series will probably be held in Arlington. They have that brand new, beautiful ballpark down in Arlington. I believe it's called Globe Life Stadium or Globe Life Park, one of the two. So again, and it would be a great, for another thing for it is the broadcasting, right? The games, the actual production of the games. People were missing out on games this year, right? People were not able to go to games like they're usually able to, and this year, again, won't be able to go to the World Series. So by having a really nice stadium, nice new, brand new, renovated ballpark, people at home will say, wow, that's really nice. Like, I need to go check that out. Ooh, I need to, and it might entice people's interest for next year when hopefully things are somewhat back to normal and we'll be able to go back to games, right? So I think that it's gonna be very interesting how this will boil down and how this will, kind of unfold, if you will. But again, the biggest thing that I want to see the MLB do, and in particular Rob Manfred, and I have often said, I call upon Rob Manfred to act as a commissioner. I do not think that he has done the job of a commissioner, mainly because he's just let every team have their way and decide whatever they want to do. And as the commissioner, especially with something like this, he needs to take a little bit more of a charge and take a little bit more of leadership and say, okay, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to follow these protocols. We're going to follow these guidelines because if we don't, we're going to have to cancel games. And they've already done that. We've seen multiple teams have 2 weeks of baseball missed due to the coronavirus. And, I mean, you see it all the time. Cancellation due to COVID. Cancellation due to COVID. Somebody caught it. I mean, this is probably the most unprecedented thing that anybody has ever seen. Games being canceled due to ailment and sickness, not weather and, whatever else that might happen. So it's going to be interesting to see if Rob Manfred implements any sort of rules and regulations for the players and for everybody else. I personally, if I'm Rob Manfred, I'm sitting down with everybody that I can, every single executive in the league, every single owner, or at least taking the owners that are in the playoffs, their teams are in the playoffs, and saying, okay, these are the guidelines that we have set out for all of you. There's going to be a curfew by 10 o'clock every single night unless the game goes later, and then the curfew will obviously be extended later. There will be cameras set up every single place that you can think of, and maybe even implement a 24-hour watch service. I mean, why not, right? I mean, that's how they caught either, I can't remember if it was Plesac or Clevenger, but that's how they caught one of them. They caught them because they were coming in late from going out one night, and it was either on camera or a desk attendant or a security guard caught them being out late and said, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be out right now. So, again, you can't have the irresponsibility that we've already seen. Guys are going to have to learn, and guys are going to have to figure it out, and, again, I know probably the mindset of some of them, it's, I'm young, I'm youthful, I'm healthy, this won't affect me, this won't bother me, I'll get sick for 2 days, and that's it. And I get that. I and many other friends of mine think that sometimes, but we also remember that this is something serious, and if it's not going to necessarily drastically affect us, it could drastically affect somebody else. And so it's more so out of common courtesy. And it's more so also, and in baseball terms, it's more so out of respect for your teammates, for your team, for the sport, and for the fans, for everybody, really, in the baseball community, because of your irresponsible actions, now we can't see that game. Now you don't get your game check. Now the guy next to you doesn't get his game check, and now your other teammate who has a chronic lung condition that has plagued him since he was a child could potentially be susceptible to catching something, and it would come back to you. And that was the issue with the Indians. I mean, Carlos Carrasco, last year he had, I believe he had a bout with leukemia, and a lot of teammates of Clevenger and Plesac were not happy, and I would not be happy either. And it's going to, and especially at that time of the year, it's going to be playoff time. It's going to be World Series time. It's going to be very little room for error on anybody's part. Whether it's a player or a manager, everybody's going to have to be held accountable evenly, because if not, then there will be some serious issues. There will be some serious problems and serious, kind of aftermath of all of this if guys do not follow through with the protocol. So I would not be shocked if there was rules that were implemented in some sort of fashion. I really would like to see that at least. I would like to see some sort of, anything, whether it's a curfew, whether it's a mandatory temperature check every time you leave the hotel or you leave the premise. Now, the other thing of it is, how are the MLB players going to respond to this? They've been able to go home and see their kids, see their wives and girlfriends, see their friends and family. They've been able to have some sort of a normal life. In a sense, if you think about it, MLB players have almost been spoiled in terms of athletes and other athletes not being able to, see their families. I mean, the NBA guys are just now being allowed to have family and just now being allowed to invite family into the bubble. And this has been for 2 months now, 2.5 months. So are we going to hear some griping from the players? Oh, I don't want to do this. I don't like to do this. I don't want to be holed up in this, hotel for the next 6-7 weeks and not see my wife. I don't want to be holed up and not be able to see my kids, whatever it might be. They have to remember that, okay, you don't necessarily have to play. They said that if you wanted to opt out of the season, you're more than welcome. A. B, if your team's in the playoffs, I would hope that winning the World Series and advancing through the playoffs would be more of a focus for you as a player than can I get outside of the hotel and go out at night? Because if that is more so of your concern than winning and being in the World Series, then really you probably should not have the job of a baseball player, because your job is to be a baseball player, to play baseball, and to win games. So again, it's going to boil down to just multiple different things, right? It's going to be, can guys be responsible? Can there be guidelines, and can they be upheld? Can this system of a bubble system work? Can players agree to it and come to a common ground and say, hey, this is all right, we're going to have to do this, there's no other way around it, we're just going to have to bite the bullet. So I'm really curious to see how it'll all unfold, and I'm really hoping, knock on wood, that we won't have any more games in the playoffs or the World Series canceled at all, because I could not imagine the aftermath and the uproar of fans and people in the baseball community if it came out that somebody was irresponsible, went out one night, got COVID, and came back and spread it to their entire team, and now all of a sudden we don't have Game 3, 4, and 5 of the NLDS, or we don't have Game 1 and 2 of the ALCS, whatever it might be. So again, responsibility, following protocols, and most importantly, just focusing on winning, focusing on playing baseball, and I think everything will run smoothly. I really do. I think it'll be a really interesting kind of, playoff situation we'll have this year. I mean, this entire year has been interesting, but, all in all, I'm really excited to see it, and quite frankly, I am beside myself to see some playoff baseball. So that's, first and foremost. So I'm really excited to see that. So that'll wrap it up for us here today. Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice little review for us. It really helps us. We're always trying to learn and get better feedback and become, better podcasters, broadcasters, journalists, and so on and so forth, so we can give you all the best and latest news in the baseball world. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be greatly appreciated, so we can also keep you all, the fans and the listeners, clued in as to when new episodes and new content and any sort of in-between news will be updated through those social media sites. Once again, everyone, thanks so much for joining me today, and have a fantastic day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.